Okay, our next speaker is Greg Piechota, and he is researcher in residence for INMA, the International News Organization. And he is working with subscription marketing using generative AI. He has even written a book with prompts that you can use on the landscape, which is very expensive unless you're an INMA member. But we're so lucky that you're here today, so I hope you'll share some insights. Please.
Thank you so much. There are good reasons to think about uses of generative AI in journalism. Journalism is important. Many of us are passionate about journalism. And if you are a manager of a news media company, you see journalism as the biggest position on your budget. When we look at hundreds of newspaper publishers, for example, newsroom is about 1/3 of the total cost of publishing a newspaper. When we model what will happen when newspapers go digital only, it's more than 50%. So whenever you will be looking for efficiencies, it's quite obvious where you look. Oh, these bloody journalists. At the same time, we talked a lot at this conference about the risks. The business is based on reputation. Actually, the risk is not just reputation and our relationship with customers. It is also legitimacy of journalism, the press freedoms, the tax breaks that news publishers have, the guarantees for news source confidentiality, and so on. It's all based on the idea that we pursue the truth. So the bar for accuracy is very high. My point of this presentation is to tell you that maybe the risks are too high at this stage. This is not necessarily where you would like to start your journey with generative AI. There are use cases, maybe of a smaller value. Marketing and sales is about 10% of the cost of a newspaper company going digital only. But the challenge is easier. And the potential efficiencies are much easier to see, even today. So I represent International News Media Association. We basically focus on the business of news, and we have thousands of members across the world. These are usually market-orientated news publishers that have, advertising customers or consumers being their main payers. And in general, what INMA is doing, we collect ideas, we collect case studies, we collect data, performance data from publishers to generate insight, basically try to discuss all together and find out how to make money so we can fund journalism, make it sustainable. And I want to start with a story from faraway place, the Down Under, from New Zealand. This is actual advertising campaign that was generated by humans, by New Zealand Media and Entertainment Company, publisher of New Zealand Herald. It won one of our awards last year. And basically the brief was coming from Australia, from Tourism Australia. The idea was that, after the first pandemic, basically they created a bubble with New Zealand so people could travel between those two countries. They couldn't have tourists from Europe. They couldn't have tourists from the States. The idea was, how can we get New Zealanders to actually visit Australia? That was the brief. The campaign was fully not automated. It was done by humans. The team of 6 people at New Zealand Media and Entertainment were working on this. So what we did, we actually tried to recreate the same campaign using the consumer generative AI tools like ChatGPT with GPT-4. So we looked at the campaign stage, the campaign stages, and we thought about, how can we use this for research, like, for example, drafting surveys, our readers, that we could segment them better, so we could decide where we should focus our efforts. How can we draft a strategy, the creative strategy for the campaign, maybe the media plan, plan all, release or distribution of all the assets, the budget, then create the actual advertisements and different variations for different segments, identify the most appealing images, generate video and audio assets from the text, and then plan distribution, plan and optimize the ads, think about iterative versions of the ads for better effectiveness, schedule those ads, and then monitor the campaign performance. For example, analyze the sentiments on social media in response to such a campaign. So basically, just by similarly to other speakers, you think about the prompts, you basically get the ChatGPT to produce good enough results that would be potentially that you could potentially use with surveys. It's just amazing how these tools are advanced today, how much they are thoughtful about the situation. Like, for example, when you think about the survey, the questions around, I don't know, bushfires that were not mentioned in the prompt were actually surfaced by the machine as a thing that you should consider planning your creatives. You might remember about the big bushfires in Australia. The Sydney was covered in smoke. It actually, was a very good point. I haven't thought about it, but the machine thought. So this is just an example of a positive hallucination of a machine, where the machine actually helps you to think. It was thinking about the media strategy, creative strategy. These ideas may not be the best in the world. They might be even not as good as the original campaign by the New Zealand Herald. But is it good enough? It's a different question. It's a different bar of expectations. And then, of course, you could create different copy variations for blog posts, for video series, for podcasts, for social media. You could actually get the ChatGPT to generate these assets together with, blog posts for Facebook with, all the emojis and so on. And then you can plan, a very detailed schedule for the release. You could also, this is an example. I took an actual post from Tourism Australia, and I copied all the comments, and asked ChatGPT to analyze it. It found some sentiments, but it also talked about, interesting ideas potentially to be used for future posts. So it is very good in analyzing this kind of consumer feedback. So this is how we did it. We just fed ChatGPT with an outline of the client's brief. We told it to play a role of a very experienced marketeer, and then we used a chain of commands, step by step, to get the machine through the whole process of planning the campaign and creating the assets. All of this took around 2 hours. So when you think about that average campaign, it takes around 4 to 6 weeks to prepare for a team of people. Even if you just, even if they work on several campaigns, and we just count one full-time employee working on it for 4 weeks, it is 184 hours. And we take the average salary for the marketeer, digital marketeer in New Zealand, and we compare it to the costs of ChatGPT and these 2 hours spent on doing that. It gives you quite tremendous potential return on investment. And it's easy to prove. It's easy to estimate. And the results are potentially good enough for many campaigns that news publishers sell. So when we think about the sources for the firm's gains, AI, of course, is going to redefine our operations. We think about, this is the first usually questions people get. Can we do more with the same resources? We have the same number of people, but can we do more campaigns? And perhaps if we do more, we can lower the price. There is some demand that is untapped today, so we will be able to sell more campaigns. We will be able to generate more campaigns. The reality is there is probably some demand that is untapped, but in fact, the focus will move to efficiency very much in the future. So perhaps can we do the same with less resources? So you will be looking for ways to basically save the cost. Maybe you don't need that many, you don't need that many contractors. You don't need that many people to do it, or people can do also other things. And then, of course, there is a big question, can we actually achieve more with the same? This is much harder to prove. There are ways to estimate the potential effect on effectiveness, and I will show you, but basically it's much harder to prove because you need to release it to the market, you need to have quite robust experimentation methodology to actually see whether it actually sells more, whether it sold more trips to Australia. But we are thinking about more applications in broadly understood marketing and in the media. And we thought about product development. So this is another case study from INMA about the Financial Times, building an app for young adults. And we basically thought, how could we use generative AI to create surveys for segmentations, like understanding habits and willingness to pay, whether people are interested in long-form journalists versus short-form breaking news journalists, and what's the differences in willingness to pay. And it excelled in creating those quite professional surveys. I found that ChatGPT in a GPT-4 version understands very well academic frameworks. Like if you tell them to use, I don't know, media use and gratifications framework or value proposition building frameworks, design thinking frameworks, it understands what you are talking about, and it will use them, apply them to the specific use case or a specific survey. You can use it to describe and visualize personas of different segments to help people think about them, and then maybe draft interviews for in-depth interviews or focus groups. It can ideate products and services addressing the pains and gains of those segments. You can use it to prototype, brainstorm, visualize features, layouts, branding, other elements for testing. I got ChatGPT actually to imagine 100 different potential titles for an app of the Financial Times. And one of the ideas was FT edits, so even quite close to the actual product. And then, of course, you could also draft plans for validating the hypothesis, testing the product, and so on. Another use case is Corriere della Sera and their onboarding process. It's one of the fastest growing news publishers in terms of digital subscriptions in Europe. They just crossed 500,000 digital subscribers. But they were so much focused on acquisition, they needed to rethink their retention efforts. And one of the most effective tools is basically onboarding of new customers. So they had an onboarding campaign, and they were thinking about changing it. We applied this use case to generative AI to summarize the theory and best practices about onboarding from the available literature. So even if it hallucinates sometimes, it actually understands a lot of academic theory around marketing. Then we analyze different sequences from different publishers to find the best practices. We could propose an improved email sequence for onboarding for the Corriere della Sera, draft all the emails, analyze the current emails and draft new emails, draft different versions of emails. The email from the editor-in-chief to subscribers who bought through political articles, who bought through sports articles, people who bought via mobile, people who bought via the website. We could actually very much personalize those onboarding sequences to different segments. And then, of course, you could think about the surveys for people who participated in those onboarding sequences and further ideas for improvement. So in all those experiments, we're using the top 15 writing assistants. We reviewed them. We used for in-depth testing 3 of them, the ones with the highest scores in the technology review sites. What you will notice is that when we started these tests in January, we were using also the ChatGPT in the 3.5 version, not really 4 version. It was not commercialized yet at that time, but there is many other tools that are commercialized. They are basically ready to market. They are used by thousands of marketeers across the world, like Jasper, like WriteSonic, like Copy AI, and so on. So this is a market with multiple tools that are relatively inexpensive, and ready to market. And we tried to analyze, what can we estimate about the potential gains in efficiency and productivity. We found that it's easy to prove this. Like, for example, we found that if these tools can save like 3% of marketers' time in your marketing department, it basically breaks even. So we are talking about like 48 minutes saved, per week. We also try to estimate potential gains in effectiveness, for example, from testing different iterations of ads. For example, the paywall stops, the offers for subscriptions, the landing pages, and we used our benchmarks about, how many experiments actually are conclusive, how many experiments prove lift, what's the actual lift, what is the average lifetime value of subscription, and we could basically estimate quite high potential gains in effectiveness, assuming that these iterations created with generative AI are not worse than what humans on average achieve. So basically, good enough quality is good enough for very high potential returns on investment. So based on this, I think that AI might accelerate the shift to in-house advertising operations and marketing operations. If you think about the average budget allocations to marketing programs, there is a lot of money today spent on ad creation management, the loyalty, customer research, and so on. And these are the areas that could be optimized, potentially for gains in productivity or efficiency. If you think about the value chain, how, for example, in the advertising markets, money flows from advertisers to publishers, you could expect that these 15 cents spent on creative services and planning of the ads and iterating of the ads. This is something for grabs now. When you hire an advertising agency, you probably pay 10% for the initial idea, but then you pay 90% for hours that people spend iterating and optimizing. So this all can be done by yourself. And of course, you might expect that this is going to be a big disruption to marketing departments and advertising industry. And perhaps, you will see agencies, they will be forced to change how they charge, perhaps from hours to maybe value, the performance of their campaigns. So some big agencies that have really creative people, have great skills to actually deliver on the ads, they probably will charge for the performance because they can't charge for the hours because many people will be doing it with off-the-shelf tools. So the big question is, of course, how this all will affect business strategy for advertising, for marketing. And perhaps you might be familiar with these ideas that there are like two generic strategies. One where you focus on low cost. So basically you are good enough but cheaper than others. And this space is going to be very difficult to compete. And then you have this differentiation strategy, like, publishers charging for content. News is free in a way. Journalism is not, because it's differentiated, it's verified, it's investigated, it's witnessed. So we can charge for these perhaps. We differentiate, we talk about trust, we talk about our journalistic process, values, and so on and so on. This is why we can charge, and perhaps the loyalty pays off in higher prices and a competitive mode. With generative AI, we might potentially shift towards the third generic strategy called focus. In the past, it was, the niche publishers would be using it. They will be differentiating by choosing a segment and just being the best in it. But maybe with these tools, we can actually scale it. We can target multiple segments with different offerings, because now we will be able to efficiently handle all those marketing to all those segments. So perhaps this focus at scale enabled by AI will be the dominant strategy, and this is what some of the researchers think will happen. We have a lot of experience with, as publishers, with data and AI projects from the past, and I think we should use these experiences to think about applying generative AI. We obviously know that the way to think about data and AI is to, the best way is not to think about it in its totality, but basically break it down into stages of a customer journey, and then the corresponding value chain of a company. How do we add value to by different activities to the end product? And then we basically ask ourselves, how can we do it more efficiently? How can we be more productive? How can we be more effective thanks to data, thanks to predictive AI, or thanks to generative AI? We know this is the way. You can apply it to journalism by mapping the journalistic process. You can apply it to marketing processes, to advertising processes, to other internal processes. And the big question that people ask is, how to approach the building of the stuff. And this is an endless discussion. Many people believe that you should start with foundations, like the data lake, and then build slowly different floors, like building a house. You build a basement, the fundaments, and then the ground floor, the first floor, the second floor. The problem is that before you get to the 5th floor, chief data officers get fired because the boards are impatient. Nobody wants to wait multiple years for the results. This is a big problem. And so experts in this, they suggest you should focus on vertical solutions. You should really focus on use cases. You should map the use cases, but then you should prioritize them and focus on solving them from the beginning to the end. So, I don't know, planning, how do we automate email? How do we automate social media is a better approach, because you can deliver results much sooner. And you can prove the point that, for example, generative AI tools could be used in your marketing. The big question is, of course, how to introduce those tools to our teams, not only journalistic, but also marketing. And there are like 2 ideas that you might find useful. One is that, of course, you still need humans in the beginning of the process to write a prompt, at least so far, for now, and then at the end to control the process. So we are talking about using generative AI as internal tools and not consumer-facing or customer-facing applications. So you need humans at the end to evaluate, to fact-check, and so on. You also, you could think about it as, inviting an intern. You start with simple tasks, and you may then progress to more sophisticated tasks over time when you gain more knowledge about the tools, but also trust to the tools. We also need to expand conversations about the policies. People are using these tools right now like hell. There is a reason, the ChatGPT is, one of the fastest growing consumer applications on the web. So we need policies, not only about journalism, but also about marketing, about back office use. We need policies how to use these tools, who can use these tools, how. What about copyrights? What about security of your data, and so on? So to summarize, there are strengths for usage of generative AI tools in marketing and sales. They are versatile, they are quite quick. There is, you can likely get return on investment from efficiency and productivity gains alone. There are weaknesses, of course, because they require human quality, so we are human control, so we are talking about internal use. Gains in effectiveness are unproven without experiments, although you can expect they should work. There is lack of true creativity and empathy. You still need humans, actually, to talk to other people and to understand them deeply. Big opportunities in personalization, expansion to new markets, for example, with translation, and training, internal training of people. There are threats, like losing differentiation. There are legal and ethical challenges that are not subject of this presentation, but we will discuss them later today. And there is a risk of negative public perception if people find those creepy ads. Thank you so much for this.
We are returning to the question about policies and regulation and ethics later on today. But just to take a little leap into that discussion, you say we need policies and keep it internal from the beginning, but who should set these policies?
So I very much agree with Agnes Stenbaum that you need to include the policies are set by the management of the company, but you need to include people from multiple departments, because these tools will not be just used for journalism. They will be used across different places. And you need general policies about who can use it, how to use it, how to evaluate those tools. What are the rules about security of personal data, security of the IP and know-how of the company, and so on. So these are urgent issues. These are not future problems. These are urgent issues today. You already hear about companies like Samsung that are banning employees from using it because they were basically what? You take, an internal report about something, you feed it to ChatGPT to summarize it because you don't have time to read 30 pages. But then there might be some company secrets there that you just released to an American company. So these are big problems of today. They are probably easier to solve. There is these big providers of enterprise software are building tools that will be more secure, more sandboxed for the office use. But this is very urgent, I believe.
And when EU comes with policy regulation?
With the policy regulation, there are issues about who is an owner of AI-generated stuff. And of course, it matters because we produce a lot of potential marketing content and so on, and you cannot IP it. There are also issues about whether what we generate, how much it infringes other people's rights. That's why you likely will see small, companies being bolder with this stuff than bigger companies. We know about publishers in Europe that, for example, Deniken in Slovakia, they illustrate 12% of daily output with AI-generated images today, because they are small. You don't expect BBC or the New York Times to do the same, because they think differently about risk.
Ollie, you have a question? I don't think there's any sound on that one.
Thanks for a great presentation, Greg. Yeah.
Thank you.
And with your broad outlook over the world, how do we compare in the media industry in Europe in general, and maybe in the Nordics in particular?
That's a great question. So the Nordics are different, but they are different not necessarily only because people are so smart. They are different also because these are very rich countries with very well-educated people, with high penetration of digital and broadband, and long traditions for things like, for example, news consumption. Like, 20 years ago, 700 out of 1,000 people in Norway were buying a newspaper. Yeah? So this is a great market to be from that perspective. It doesn't mean that publishers here are not good. You have, first, it's quite concentrated market. Concentration on one hand, maybe decreases diversity. On the other hand, these publishers have money to invest in new technologies. That's why you see a lot of long-term investments. That's why you can see Extra Bladet that, a tabloid in a very small country investing in its own NLP tools for personalization. That's why you see Schibsted experimenting with multiple AI tools across Norway and Sweden. These are small countries, but these are companies that are massive on their markets. They have resources, they have the money, and they have the long-term thinking. So this is a big difference from other places. Other places don't enjoy the same market conditions. And it matters. I was just yesterday talking with one of the colleagues. These are great discussions in the corridors about, for example, the impact of, charts on search. A common thread. People are asking, what will happen if more and more people use charts to answer questions rather than going to search? Of course, this might potentially impact traffic acquired by publishers from search. The thing is that this traffic differs very much across the world. On average, 1/3 of all page views, according to data from Chartbeat from the first quarter this year, is referred by search engines to the news sites. But in Nordic, it's 16%. In East Asia, it's 40%. So you could also think that these tools, if they go to disrupt, unfortunately, again, they will disrupt the poorer markets more than the richer markets. You know, the poor always are worse. This is, unfortunately, what might be also the result of this disruption.
I can't say on this happy note. Let's go to break. But on this note...
You are in Copenhagen, yeah? So these guys are better.
Let's say it that way. Okay, but thank you so very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much.